So, really nice to see you all this morning. It's an interesting sort of topic that we're covering today around those performance conversations that are really so important at keeping our business successful. In business, as leaders, we set objections, we have plans, we have a vision of what we want to create in the business. And the difference between realizing the gap and achieving that vision and understanding where we are today really comes down to the power of us being able to communicate that vision, take people on the journey and give them feedback in a way that motivates and engages them rather than having them feeling punished. And that's an interesting sort of tension that I think a lot of leaders struggle with. We want to be seen as empathetic and supportive and to build a nice collaborative culture, but we've got to get stuff done as well. And a lot of us struggle with finding that right balance between creating that tension and setting good expectations, but being supportive as well. And to be honest, it's something that I struggled with for a long, long time in business. So what we're going to do today is sort of break that down a bit, start to look at the tools and the ways in which we can engage and get those outcomes that we want for our team. And we'll touch on some of those other behavioral aspects as well. But for those of you that don't know me well, one of the things I need to own is I'm really bad with tech. I'm going to do my best today. So we'll see how that goes. So please be patient with me and we'll see what happens. But just as a bit of an introduction, with Pragmatico, work with all sorts of organizations of different sizes. As you can see on the screen there, I work with some large multinationals, companies like Mediterranean Shipping and Busy, but I love working with small businesses as well. What I find fascinating in the 4 or 5 years I've been doing this work is that the issues are the same. And so often it comes down to leadership and having conversations and so on. I run a range of programs that we tailor to this type of clients that I'm working with. The Leadership Odyssey, as it says, is a 12-month program, but we've also designed an online program up to 6 months to make it more accessible to middle managers or operators of smaller businesses. I do a lot of mentoring with executives and business owners, either one-to-one or in small groups. And I love running workshops and doing keynotes and emceeing as well. So that's probably the mix of what I want to do, how I like to work, and we'll come back and look at some other options there. But let's get straight into it. I talked about how much and how often leaders struggle with accountability and getting things done. I came across this study a few years ago that was the 2019 CEO benchmarking report. And one of the questions that they asked a group of leading CEOs from North America is, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? And this chart shows us what leading CEOs say is their greatest weakness in business. And one in five, nearly 1 in 5, 18% said their greatest weakness was actually holding people accountable. And that certainly aligns with my experience. But then I had a look at the other factors that were covered up in the board here. And let's just step along with that. And we can see that if we look at the other ones I've highlighted, holding people accountable, but getting rid of underperformers, communicating clearly, having empathy for employees, motivating employees, employing the best people. What we see is that for most CEOs, well, about 60% of CEOs, their greatest challenge in business is actually people performance. How do we hold them accountable? How do I give feedback? How do we engage? How do we motivate? And it's just a chronic problem. And the more I talk to different groups and different organizations, I can see just how endemic this situation is. I think I've got some good ways of trying to manage that and make it more comfortable for everybody. And that's what we're going to focus on for the next half hour. So if we're thinking about people performance, the obvious question is, well, why do people underperform in the first place? And I think this is a really important question to consider because it just comes down to understanding the root cause of the problem. We can cajole people and give them feedback and tell them, I want more from you, I need more from you. But if we don't understand what their struggle is in the first place, we don't really know the best way to have that conversation with them to actually fix the problem. So this is a common conversation I have with my clients. And what I challenge them is that there's only 5 reasons why people underperform. So it's our role as to be a good leader is to identify which of the 5 we're dealing with and get in and fix it. So let me just put it out to you, just to put in the chat. Do you have any idea what any of those 5 reasons why people underperform could be? So if you can just pop it in the chat and let's have a look at what you come up with. Lack of time. Yeah. Thanks, James. Yeah. Lack of time, lack of skill. They're in the wrong role. No clear KPIs. Absolutely. So they're great examples and they all align. But let's go through my list of 5 and let's see what we come up with. The first one is lack of clarity. And it came up with a couple of the comments there. Role clarity. What are my KPIs? What are my performance standards? And this is by far the most common reason why people struggle to perform. They're not really clear on what good looks like. As leaders, we haven't really been clear on what their key results areas are. And we often lack the detail around KPIs or performance standards about what we really need from them. And this speaks to lack of role clarity. When it's not done well, it actually becomes a stressor in the workplace because the person in our team is not really clear on what they should be doing. And often as leaders, we just don't lean in enough and have enough conversations and give enough feedback to give them that direction that they need. And I can tell you, in the absence of feedback, people want more direction. It's actually, we hold back as leaders from giving good feedback. But every time I work with teams and middle managers, they keep telling me, we want more feedback, we want more engagement from our leaders and managers. So a lack of clarity is definitely a big one. The next one we're going to look at is lack of knowledge. And it's not that people necessarily need to go on a training program or formal training. It's really asking the leader to step in and be more of a coach or a mentor to understand where their skill gaps are, what they're not sure of. And it might be just revisiting what a good process looks like, or it might be some mentoring advice about the words to use, how to approach a situation, how to ask questions in the right way in order to help them close the gap and be successful. Number 3 was touched on by a couple of people, lack of time, but basically lack of resources, where people say, oh, I don't have the time, I don't have the headcount, I don't have the equipment, I don't have the technology, but for some reason I'm lacking in the equipment or the capability that I need in order to get things done. Sometimes lack of resources or lack of time can be confused with not being clear on what the priorities are. And so that again comes back to lack of clarity. If someone's saying, I don't have the time, it's really important for us as leaders to clarify, well, what are the right priorities? And revisit that and have a conversation, because it's easy for people to get distracted by what they like to do or what they find easier to do, as opposed to what's the most important priority for the business right now. And again, we need those open conversations so that we have time to establish that and create that clarity for them. The next one is lack of motivation. And that can be impacted by a number of things. We motivate teams effectively when we set clear objectives. We share the business plan with them. We help them understand how their activities align to the business plan. And that gives them a greater sense of purpose about their role in helping the business be successful. But sometimes we lose motivation because we're distracted. And it's a reality that sometimes people don't perform as well because they've got other issues. They've got personal issues going on. They've got problems in their relationship. The kids are sick. They're worried about finances. And that impacts all of us to some extent, let's face it. So it's important as leaders that we are empathetic about when someone is having these types of struggles, but we stay close to them and provide support and clarity and try to understand, well, how long is this going to go on for? How can I support you in the meantime? But continue to have the conversations, because we do need them ultimately to get the work done at some stage. So those 4 are probably in order of priority and in order of frequency as they happen in business. The last one is, if you've got someone in your team that's struggling, and we've reviewed clarity and we've created very clear expectations about what we want from them. We know that they have all the knowledge in order to perform. They've got all the resources, and we're clear on priorities about what needs to get done. We've had the conversations about motivation and linking their role to purpose and so on, and they're still struggling. Well, we need to consider the last one, which is lack of capability. Sometimes we just don't get the hire right. And these are people that either we need to find another role for them in our business, or unfortunately let them go. And that's a hard call. But if we've done our due diligence about understanding all 5 reasons for why someone might be struggling in their role and we can't fix them, this is unfortunately the next place we need to visit. So our role as leaders is to identify which of these issues we're dealing with and get on top of it as quickly as we can. And if we document all of these conversations, if unfortunately it gets to number 5, we're in the right position, we've done all the right things, we've followed the process, and we can have those more difficult conversations coming from a safe place and coming from a good place too. So that's the reasons why I underperform. Let's just start to think about the next piece of the puzzle, which is understanding how to get the most out of our team. And when there's a gap in performance, we come down to having to give our people some type of feedback to provide clarity. And there's all sorts of reasons why we hold back from giving the feedback that we know we should. We struggle with the conversation. We're not sure how to do it. We don't want to upset people. We want to have that relationship of being empathetic and supportive. We want to be liked. I know in my last business, that was my struggle. I wanted to be the nice guy in the business, and I struggled between trying to maintain that persona and getting things done. And in the end, as a leader, I had a successful business, but only through my hard work. And I didn't really engage my team enough in the process to get things done the right way. So while I had a successful business, I don't see that I was a successful leader at that time. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about the feedback process. So let's start to think about what that looks like. And the first step that we need to think of in giving feedback is mindset. Where is my head at before I even approach this conversation? And because we often find these conversations challenging, it's very easy for us to try to control the whole situation. And if I think back to giving feedback, I would try to control everything. Before the meeting began, I would set it up like a chess game. I'm going to say this, and if they respond this way, well, then I'm going to say that or this. But if they go that way, then I might say this. And I would just try to map out the whole thing so that I would feel comfortable with the level of uncertainty that takes place whenever we start these conversations. And that's completely the wrong way to go about it. When there's a performance issue, our first step is not necessarily to give feedback and fix the problem. It's really to try to understand the problem in the first place. So the very first aspect of mindset is to be curious. I know I've seen something and I've got an issue that I need to deal with, but I don't know everything about what's happening here. And my task to be a good leader is to try to identify what are the issues, what are the aspects of this story that I'm not across, that I don't understand. And I shouldn't be making a decision about what the next steps might be until I've got all this information. The second aspect of mindset is to be caring. Good leaders care about the people in their team. The best leaders, the companies that are most efficient and most successful, have a leadership group that actually cares about the people in their organization. And if I've got someone in my team that's struggling and I approach this conversation with care for the person and curiosity about what's happening, it's really hard for me to mess this up. It might go away in which I hadn't anticipated, which might challenge my desire for certainty and know what the outcome could be. But it's actually the healthiest way to approach this situation, to get all the information and come up with the best outcome. And that can be challenging to do sometimes. So the first step is mindset. Approach it with care and curiosity. The second step is to identify and to share with them, well, what's the problem? What's the performance issue that I need to be talking to you about? What's the issue that I'm concerned about? And to label it just with a 2 or 3 word headline. I'm concerned about your missed KPIs. You haven't been making enough sales calls lately. Or we've had this feedback from one of our customers and I need to check this with you. Or I've had this situation we've had an injury in the workplace. Whatever it is, the 2 to 3 word headline around what the reason for this conversation. Then once I've shared the observation, then I need to share the impact. So this is what's happened, and I'm concerned about it because, and then I talk about the impact on the customer, on the culture or the morale of the business, on our safety. Why am I concerned about this? Why is this important for us to have this conversation? And then the next step is what most leaders seem to struggle with the most is we need to shut up. When so often I have a meeting with a client and they're talking about a performance issue, and I say, well, tell me about the conversation. And they tell me in no uncertain terms about how strong they were, how they gave really clear feedback about what they wanted. And so, well, then I said, well, what did they say? What did your employees say? And they look at me a bit dumbstruck because we approach it from that more imposing perspective that I've got to create change in my business without really engaging the person. See, the next step for me, once I've shared the issue and talked about the impact, is to ask them for their side of things. Because it's when I shut up and I'm passing the baton on to them, I'm going to see whether or not they're taking responsibility for the problem, whether they're going to maybe try to push blame somewhere else, or are they going to bring some information that I wasn't aware of that gives me a better understanding of what's happening. the most important part where power takes place is when I'm asking my employee to speak and explain what the problem is. And once they start to share that, now it's my opportunity to ask some questions and get more clarity about their story, about what's been happening. And so we're having a conversation about the problem. It's not about whether they're a bad person or just not good enough. We're trying to understand what the problem is and which of those 5 reasons for underperformance are we dealing with. And once I've got that, now I know basically how we need to move forward past this point. And so my next step is again, well, is to ask them, what do you think you should do about this? I want them involved. I want them to take responsibility and think about what they need to do to fix the problem. And if I'm happy with what they've suggested, fantastic. We're going to go ahead with that. But sometimes I want a bit more. And I'll say, well, what about if you said this? Or maybe I think you should do something like that. And the conversation continues until we agree on what next steps are. Or sometimes it's a really serious issue. It's a major customer problem. It's a major safety issue, and I need to be stronger in my engagement with them. And at times I just need to be really directive and to say, look, I understand what you're saying, but in this situation, what I need you to do is A, B, C, and I lay it out for them. And there's no room for negotiation at all. And so this gives me the flexibility to understand, engage, and work out what's the best outcome for both them and for the organization. The last step, number 6, is all about accountability because it's not going to finish then. I'm going to let them know that we're going to have a chat in a couple of days' time, and I'll let them know when because I want to see how their action, how their intervention to fix the problem is actually working and starting to make a difference. And until I close that accountability loop, I have no real understanding or commitment from them or from me about what's going to happen. And I'll also send an email, just a few dot points about the conversation, what we've agreed, and when we're going to meet next time. And that is a really thorough way of managing the conversation. It's not confrontational, it's collaborative. So it's approaching any issue around performance in your business as a collaborative problem solving approach rather than me trying to impose my will on the way I think things should be done. So it's a really important approach, not only in process, but in terms of mindset as well. It's so easy when we're being critical in giving feedback that instead of having engagement from them, people just get defensive and they shut down and they become stressed. Whereas I think taking the approach I'm outlining here is a way in which we can lower their defenses and just open it up into a really open and learning conversation on both parts. So when should this conversation take place? Ideally, as soon as possible after the incident or as soon as we become aware that there's an issue. But the weekly one-to-one is just such an important opportunity to continue to meet and engage with our team. And I recommend weekly. And if it's done well and regularly, in most cases, it should only be half an hour or so. Now, I have so many leaders tell me I don't have time to spend a half hour a week with my direct reports. Or that sometimes they say, my people are so busy, they don't feel like they've got time for this regular meeting with me. And I think, what are we talking about here? You know, people are the most important asset in your business. It's so important that we maintain close contact with them so that we understand what their drivers are, what they're motivated by, what their triggers are, what are the things that are going to hold them back. I want to know what they're focused on. Are they struggling? Are they doing well? Are they feeling like they're winning in this game of business? Or are they just looking for help? And if I'm not having a regular conversation with them to support them, to understand them and give direction when it's needed, there's no way the business can be as successful as it should be. So this is all the reasons why having that regular one is so important. And now we're going to go through the 6-stage process, and I'll share this on the screen as well about what a good one-on-one looks like. So bear with me while I try to work out how to share this screen again. And there we go. There's the slide. So the first step is to just check in. We're going to spend a couple of minutes. Hey, how are you going? Is anything in mind for you at the moment that you want to talk about? Often, most times there's not, but sometimes there is. And I'll say, well, how's your week been? Give me a number out of 10 for your personal week and give me a number out of 10 for your business week. How's everything been going for you? And hopefully we've got good numbers, but it's a chance to check in and see how they're feeling. If they were to share a personal score and it's maybe only a 4 or 5 or something like that, I might say, would you want to talk about that? So give them an opportunity to share and for me to understand what's happening. Sometimes they won't, but we're going to give them the opportunity to choose whether they're going to share or whether they're just going to keep it private, which is obviously their right to do as well. If they're struggling with business, now's the opportunity to start to understand where their gaps are and what their problems are. So we're starting to build a connection. It's a bit of an icebreaker to see how they're going. Number two, tell me about what you've been focused on over the last week. What are your priorities? At any particular wins? Anything you're particularly pleased about? Anything that didn't go the way you expected? So now we're starting to see where their head is at, what they've been focused on. And I'm thinking with this conversation, are they focused on the right things? Have they, their idea of what's important, what they need to prioritize, aligned with what my expectations are? So we're going to have a conversation about this. And especially when people aren't in, say, a sales role, like a lot of sales and operational roles, we've got clear KPIs around number of calls and presentations or output of equipment and machinery and productivity and so on. In so many other roles, though, that's not appropriate, whether they might be more project based. So I want to understand, what have you been working on? What are your issues? And to make sure that they're working on the right things. It's just so important. And again, this is very conversational, but it's an opportunity for me to give some feedback and direction about the information they've just shared with me. Step number three, blockers. Is there anything in particular you're struggling with? Is there anything I can do to help you? What support do you need from me to help you be more successful? And again, looking at the script on the screens there, is there anything slowing you down that we can remove or simplify? Our role is to help, support, direct, unblock, facilitate, to help them be successful. Because at the end of the day, the more successful they are, the more successful we're going to be. And again, it's not about being directive or micromanaging. This is just understanding how they're going, where their wins are, what they're struggling with. And the more I understand about how they perform and how they approach their role, the more supportive and directive I can be. I've got this little phrase I came up with recently: great leaders connect and direct. We need to do both. Like, some leaders are great at connecting, some leaders are great at directing, but it's only when we bring both together, we get that synergy of building strong relationships that motivates people, plus giving them the direction so that they know what good looks like and what the business needs. Number four, feedback exchange. Okay, I'd like to give you some feedback about things that I've seen this week, and then I would go into that constructive feedback process that we just covered a few minutes ago. So it's specific, it's involved, it's very clear, and we've got some accountability in there. But I'm also going to give them a chance to say, is there anything more I can do for you? Give me some advice about how I can be a better leader. Now, those two words, feedback and advice, are really important in managing teams. So when I give feedback to someone in my team, I'm giving them some insights about what their previous performance has been like and where there's potentially gaps. For me to ask someone in my team to give me feedback and leader, I'm asking them to tell me what I've been doing wrong over the last period, last week or month or whatever. It's so much easier for them to give me advice, because advice isn't telling me what I've been bad at. It's telling me what I could be better at in the future. And it's a completely different emotional loading. And it's much easier for someone in my team to give me advice about how I could be better than telling me how I've been bad or not so good previously. So give me some advice about how I could support you better over the next week or over the period ahead. And it's a much easier conversation for them to come up with. So we've looked at connecting, understanding their priorities, clearing blockers. We've given each other some advice and some feedback each way. Now, I may not do this every week, but the next step is really about, what are their professional development plans? How am I helping them grow and be more successful in the business? So again, the business can continue to grow. Sometimes people tell me when I lay out this structure, I've got this couple of people in my team, they are fantastic. They do so much. They're really high performers. They always get things done. I have no problem with it at all. Fantastic. Like, I wish everyone in our team was like that. But they're the people we need to start to stretch. Well, they're the people we need to add some challenge to. And this is definitely the time to think about their professional development. Do they need more training? Do they need more mentoring from me or someone else in the team? Can I give them more responsibility and really test and stretch their capability? Because if I can get some more things off my plate, that's going to help me be more successful and enhance their professional development as well. This is such an important period. As I said, in most cases, maybe we might just visit this once a month, but there are always opportunities to think about them and their growth professionally and personally. So we've been chatting for about 25, 27 minutes. The last step is to agree on the content of the conversation, what we're each committing to over the next week, and just confirming our time to catch up in a week's time. So again, it's a pretty straightforward process. Everything that I do, from the way in which I give feedback, understanding performance, and managing my one-on-one, is all directed at that idea of connect and direct. It gives me the time and the frequency of time with my team to make sure I've got good connections. We understand each other well. They know who I am. I know what their motivators and triggers are, plus giving them the support and the direction they need in order to be successful, which means the business is going to be successful too. And getting that balance right is just so important. So that's the nuts and bolts of how we run performance conversations. The thing that often holds us back in performance, though, is that hesitation of getting it wrong, or being concerned that if I give this feedback, our relationship is going to break down. I'm not going to be likable. It's going to create some distance between us. And so much of that is a behavior rather than process. So I think what I've shared with you, I'm confident, and the feedback I get from clients is that these processes work consistently if you just stick to the flow. But there's two aspects to business. One of my business values is behavior over knowledge. So I've shared some knowledge about how to engage and manage teams well. What continues to hold us back is the behavior. So a lot of these things you may have already been aware of. But what I find is that people still hold back from having these conversations. They're not sure about the behavior. They're not sure about the right way to manage things. And so much of the focus in my conversations, in my longer programs, or in my mentoring is giving people the understanding, the EQ, if you like, about their mindset, the mindset of their employees. So we're matched and we continue to build those strong relationships that aren't just about like happy families in the workplace, but that produce a really high performing work team. That's my coverage for this morning. It's just such an interesting thing because we think about being a strong leader. And as a strong
Mm,
leader, I need to demonstrate my strength and show how smart I am and impose my will on the people in my team.
mm,
And it seems appealing and it seems to make sense. But every time we do that and we're pushing someone into a situation or a conversation, we're actually breaking down connection and we're breaking down trust. And trust
mm,
is one of the most highest value predictors of what we need to do to build a high performing team. We need
mm.
strong relationships. So how we manage these conversations is vitally important to maintain the relationship, but also just as importantly, get the performance that we need. A really strong leader is someone that's comfortable about moving into a conversation with uncertainty, about not really being sure about where this is going to go. Because if I've got some performance issue in my business, well, I want to fix it. And it's so easy to fall into the trap of starting the conversation, knowing what the outcome needs to be before I've really understood what I'm dealing with. And so
Yeah.
it's a stronger leader that can step into that conversation with uncertainty and just be focused on what's the best outcome, being
Mm,
interested and caring about what that person is going to bring to the table, and then working out together collaboratively how we need to move forward. That's real
yeah.
strength from a leadership perspective, in my opinion. Well, I hope you found this morning helpful. I am going to repeat these on a regular basis. We'll probably do one of these every month. So keep an eye out for the emails coming through about different topics and how they might evolve. Have a great day, everybody. Really good to see you here. Thanks for your time.